The purpose of this video is to demonstrate the operation of two trains. One that you'll probably recognize as a catalog set from American Flyer by A.C. Gilbert, and the other one you'll recognize the hardware. You'll recognize the Alco diesels and the streamlined passenger coaches, but you won't recognize the road name, specifically the paint scheme. It's a little different. You'll certainly recognize the road name, but not the scheme because it is custom painted. The first one, of course, is this one, the Santa Fe Chief. It is catalog set K5375W, the Chief diesel passenger train. Now, I have purposely removed 471, the B unit with the horn, for purposes of this demonstration so that we can get a little bit better apples upon apples comparison. I had previously rebuilt this catalog train set. I had built it to my usual specifications and standards and best practices, and it has been a very good performer. In October of 2024, I made a modification to this train that I had never made to any others, and that is I replaced the trucks on both motors with trucks that had been rebushed. Some of the operational characteristics that this train had demonstrated prior to that rebushing was, in no particular order, increased heat on the motors, a little bit of increased noise, and a performance which was not up to what my expectations were. Specifically, I like to kind of measure my trains with their performance of the voltage required to take it up to 70 miles an hour in a scaled speed, reaching a steady state. Now granted, I agree, as I have mentioned before, voltage and speed and even tractive force is not the underlying most important measure on these motorized units. It is the amp draw, but I have not had an opportunity to measure the amp draw on this one, but I hope to find the time to do so in the near future. First thing I want to do is operate this one. Once it reaches a steady state, demonstrate how quiet it is, how cool it is. Of course, you won't be able to really demonstrate that, but how quiet, smooth, and efficient it is in its operation. The rebuild not only included the motorized unit, but it also included the trucks on the non-motorized unit in every passenger coach. I think it is very valuable when rebuilding these trains to pay attention to addressing things like friction, drag and resistance, which is drag and resistance. Drag and resistance, or friction, is cumulative, which means if one car drags or has drags or has resistance, the next car that has the same is simply going to compound that. But I believe that cleaning these trucks thoroughly, bringing them up to standards, doing small things like checking the gauge and making sure that the journal boxes are properly lubricated is very important as to the amount of work that the locomotive has to perform. And that's what I had done to this train, but the missing link was getting that rebushing done. So it has been end to end, I think, thoroughly rebuilt, and it has been a pleasure to operate. Right now, I am getting voltage measurements beneath what I suspected I would get to get this up to 70 miles an hour scale speed. Now, I use a algorithm and a tool that is available online to measure the scaled speed of a train, and I like to run these passenger trains at about 70 miles an hour scale speed. So first, let's take a look at the Chief in operation. The train has reached a steady state performance of approximately 70 miles an hour scaled speed, although I believe this is a little over 70. Now, I was using a scaled speed calculator that currently I've not been able to find online any longer, but I'm going to keep doing the research so I can get that information to you. That scale speed calculator suggests 60 inches. I want to use straight track, so 60 inches of straight track from approximately this point right here to this point right here. 60 inches, and it's traveling that in a little less than 3 seconds. Well, that exceeds 70 miles per hour at scale speed. Of course, when it was rebuilt, not only was the motor rebuilt, both motors, and all the mechanical and electrical components checked and rebuilt to my usual specifications and standards of others, in addition to new pull motors. Now, what I noticed was, and again, I haven't measured this with my thermometer, my digital or laser thermometer, but I believe the motors are running cooler and quieter. There's almost no grinding noise whatsoever. As a matter of fact, most of the noise on the train is the contact of the wheels to the railhead and the clickety-clack as it goes through switches. I had the 18B set to 50 miles per hour setting. I measured the voltage on the railhead right here at 13 volts. Now, this layout has connections to the transformer every fourth section of track using 14 and 16 gauge wire. So I feel that it is very consistent around the entire oval. And I think that's one thing that provides a very consistent operating environment for the train, is that constant voltage. Again, I believe this is traveling more than 70 miles per hour scaled speed. By the way, when I measured the voltage, I measured that not with a digital voltometer, but with an analog voltometer. So digital would have been better, but the best I can tell is 13 volts. Now, it can continue running at this steady state for a long time, and it has run for quite some time. And that was always my specifications and requirements for my trains. I didn't want to have to drive them constantly by adjusting the voltage. I wanted them to perform at a steady state so that I and my guests could enjoy them. And this one has certainly lived up to those expectations. Again, the B unit 471 is left out on purpose to do a more direct apple-to-apples type comparison to another train. Following that long steady state run, I took a temperature reading at the bottom of each motor and received 117 degrees on the front motor and 113 degrees, I believe, on the back motor Fahrenheit, which is far below the 130 some odd degree ranges I was getting prior to changing the trucks to be those that had been rebushed. So I've been very, very pleased with this train, and I look forward to continuing that type of work on my other diesels. Well, this is the train we'll be comparing the Santa Fe with. As I mentioned before, it is A.C. Gilbert, American Flyer by A.C. Gilbert. It is Alco diesel, both power and dummy unit, and streamlined passenger coaches. It has a unique paint scheme. You'll recognize the road name, of course, the stacked in H and the New Haven. You'll recognize the coloration, of course, but this person who did the paint on this, who painted them, workmanship is excellent, and they changed the paint, the scheme just a little bit. They were numbered 494 and 495 after the trains by the same number, Gilbert, of which these could have been. They could have been originally those trains. I have no way of knowing. I don't have any way of knowing the age, although when I broke the locomotive down and the passenger coaches for disassembly, it looked like the mid-1950s range of Alco diesels. It does have the 4-position reverse unit, but look at the coloration and the paint job on these. Now let's get into the passenger coaches, which are absolutely beautiful. By the way, the person that did the painting on these also repainted the black area as well. The workmanship, of course, is just outstanding, and it grabs your attention. It's the eye candy right away. But one of the things that drew my attention was the consistency of this work. Every coach looks to be exactly the same as far as positioning of all the lettering. Some of the fonts are maybe a little bit larger than what Gilbert used. Also, I noticed that I believe that the original windows mylar was stripped out and this special mylar inserted that has the half blocked out and half clear, giving the impression of shades being pulled down either halfway or all the way in the passenger coach. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Now, this one did not come with, at least to my knowledge, a dummy B unit. It does have the dummy A unit. Now, in this train, the dummy A unit has the horn. In the Santa Fe, the dummy B unit has the horn. So when this train operates, there is going to be a little bit of a buzz coming from the dummy A unit because of the presence of the horn, whereas in the Santa Fe it did not. But so far, my observation has been that it runs just as quiet as the Santa Fe. I'll also be measuring its temperature. I'll also be trying to set it at the same voltage in the same setting on the transformer to obtain the measured 70 miles per hour scaled speed. Absolutely beautiful. It was rebuilt with the same precision and care as the Santa Fe in that I completely disassembled the passenger coaches, specifically the trucks, wheels, and axles, so that they all could be cleaned and re-lubricated with a little higher viscosity lubricant, especially where the axles meet the trucks in the journal boxes. Again, the goal, although unmeasured, was to reduce or lower the friction. Friction being defined as drag or resistance. And it's cumulative, so we wanted to at least address it so that hopefully we were helping out the locomotive in the amount of work that it has to do. Again, sometime in the future, maybe running this on the test track to get the amperage drawn would be extremely valuable, but at this time it's not possible. So let's take a look at it in operation. All right, we've got the New Haven 494 and 495, I think was the number on the layout. I've got it running in the opposite direction. So I was having a little bit of challenge in getting one of the locomotives to negotiate this switch. I don't think it's locomotive related, I think it's switch related. So I'm not going to put a lot of work into diagnosing that. I'm going to let the owner know about it, but I truly believe it is the switch. Well, right now it is operating at approximately 70 miles per hour scaled speed, that being 60 inches measured from this rail connection to the rail connection right there. Matter of fact, it may have gone above 70 miles an hour. But it is smooth, it is quiet, and I think we have reduced the friction, that is the drag and the resistance of the cars. to the point where the only thing you can hear is the road noise, or what's called in a car, you might say the tire noise of the wheels coming in contact with the railhead. There is a slight hum coming from the dummy A unit, but I believe that's because it has the horn mounted there. A lot of work went into rebuilding these motors to my usual specifications and standards, as well as every truck on every car. This train came with 2 mail baggage cars, and they look identical. It looks identical, the second one, to this one. They are perfect twins. But I chose not to operate that one simply because to measure apples to apples with the Santa Fe. Not that I want to demonstrate the Santa Fe is a better train. I just wanted to demonstrate that they both run at a pretty high standard. I think this one could benefit from new bushes being put on the trucks, with new bushes being put on the motor units. And we'll let it run. I'm going to let it operate a little while longer to build up at least enough measurable heat for the motors. The mile per hour setting on the 18B transformer is the 0 of 60, whereas for the Santa Fe it was 50. I turned off all the air handling components in my shop just for these tests to minimize the outside interference noises, so that if there is noise, I want to hear it coming from the train. And if I owned this one, I would be very pleased with its performance. Very smooth and very steady. Now I measured this one to be about 12, somewhere between 12 and a half and 13 volts at the same location on the railhead. Seems odd that I had the other one set at 50 and this one set at the 0 on 60, and they both seem to be producing about 13 volts. But that's an 18B with a carbon roller for you, I guess. What I like is the steady state performance. No hands on the control. It just seems to maintain a perfect steady state, steady speed, no matter where it is on the layout. It too could probably benefit from a amp draw test, and it too could probably benefit, I think I mentioned earlier, from having the motor trucks rebushed. But so far, so good. I'm not going to run the 5th coach simply because I wanted to make a better comparison to a Santa Fe that had rebushing on the motors.